Hi everyone, and what's up guys. In this video I want to talk about the components and actually how can we get the component from appropriate game object. So we see that in our hierarchy panel we currently had the main camera and this empty game object. So no empty, but he has actually this MyFirstScript attached on it. So I want to talk about just these components that we can attach on our game object and how we can actually get the appropriate component from our game object to our script. So we see that we currently have just this transform that we are getting this transform actually by default. Whenever we create new game object, this transform comes by default, and we attach a MyFirstScript, so our first script actually, to our game object, and this is fine. So also we can attach more components on our game object, like colliders that, as we said in the Unity Basics Part 1 video, so colliders just to detect collisions of two game objects. So search here for example for the Box Collider 2D. And now our game object have the Box Collider 2D and MyFirstScript attached on it. So if we now go here to our first script, and let's say we want to use this Box Collider in our own reasons. For example, we want to in our game turn off this collider from amount of time. So for example, we will type here Box Collider 2D, of course, and give the name, which is going to be Box Collider simply, so like that. And in the start method, if we want, for example, on the beginning of the game turn off this collider, what we're going to do, so we are going to say here Box Collider dot enabled is equal to false. So let's try to save this and see what will actually happen when we run the game. And we of course getting a null reference exception. So we will talk in further videos and tutorials about these exceptions and errors that we are getting, but for now we just see that our console actually give us the error, and we can proceed and continue our game. So for that we must fix this error. And what we are missing here, so we missing getting components for our game object. So let's say here Box Collider and is equal to get component, and in this get component function pass the Box Collider 2D parentheses on the end and the semicolon, and now this line of code will get component from our Box Collider. So just getting this Box Collider 2D component, and then we can actually use what we want with this collider. So now if I save this, go back to Unity and now run the game, now we see that this actually works. Now our Box Collider is turned off because if you remember, we said here Box Collider dot enabled is equal to false. So this is just a short example of how can we use some component in our further game development. So for that we see that we actually turn off our collider, and this everything works very fine. So I want to talk about how can we actually get the component from our Box Collider 2D, because if you see, we doesn't have any method that handle the name get component. So this get component, how we call this get component, because we doesn't have, as I said, any method or function that handle this name actually. So we see that we inherit this MonoBehavior class. So we are child class by default, and this MonoBehavior class we inherit, and actually this MonoBehavior is being inherited from our side. So this MonoBehavior actually provide us all these functions that we need along with our work in Unity. So if we, for example, want to use here rigid body 2D, so and name my body, and this will actually work when we just get component from this rigid body my body component, and all of that provide our mono behavior. So this mono behavior is a class that provide us to use his functions that comes by default whenever we create a new script. So we are actually on the beginning just a child class that inherit all of functions that mono behavior actually include, and for that we are now can get component our box collider 2D and can actually use later this box collider dot enabled. You see how can we use it, and I think I explained how can we get the component and how can we use this same component in our game development. So I think you now learned something new in this video. I think this is probably a last video in this tutorial about C#. I want to congratulate you for finishing up this tutorial and see you in some next tutorial when we going to create, of course, some of our tiny example games. As I said at the beginning of this tutorial, we are going to actually in this channel create some example small and tiny games, and all of these C# lessons will be much more understandable and simplified to you. So stay tuned for that. Again, congratulating you for finishing up this tutorial and see you in the next tutorial. Thank you.